feelings or did you feel all the feelings? Ay, Dios santo. I'm telling you, ya me estoy haciendo señora con mis dichos. I'm like, santísimo. Ay. Miren, isn't there something, oh, my voice, les digo, sí estoy emocional. Isn't there something so magical about feeling seen and held and represented? Y tener lugares así where we feel that embrace of our cultura, of our beauty, of our bodies, of our words, of our history, of nuestros papis y mamis. And a huge part of that is how we are seen not only here, but in larger places in the media. The media is such a huge way of driving social change, but also seeing us represented matters. And I'm about to introduce one of like the baddest of the baddest in the representation world. No sé si así se dice, pero así lo dije. Very eloquent I am. Like, y vivo en México, así que my Spanglish está más de Spanglish. Pero anyway. Stacy de Armas is SVP of Inclusive Intelligence and Initiatives at Nielsen. Imagine flexing that. Be like, that's me. You're about to meet her. She's a media inclusion thought leader and subject matter expert. So she pretty much tells people, like, this is a badass Latinx people community. Make decisions accordingly. We want to see Latina people in the media. We want to see us everywhere. ¿Sí o no? Entonces, pónganse listas para recibir, because Stacy is about to like educate us on media representation and how we can be a part of that. Are you ready? Welcome Stacy de Armas to the stage. My little. Oh. Little salsa. Gracias.
Thank you. Hola a todos. I am so happy to be here with you today on the main stage. This really is a dream. I had the opportunity to present and have this talk once a few years ago for We All Grow, and this is a remarkable turnout. So give yourselves a hand for coming out in the traffic and on the Friday. Thank you, Kim, for that incredible introduction. I am Stacy de Armas, affectionately known in my family as Stacy. I am also, I'm a mother, and I'm a daughter. I am a sister, and I'm a niece, and I'm a mentor, and I'm a mentee. And in my professional life, as Kim told you, I also work on equity projects at Nielsen. So many of you know Nielsen as the company that does TV ratings, but we do a lot more than that. We do social and economic research. We evaluate our representation and content. We do a lot of fun things. And I like to say that I work at the intersection of media, entertainment, advocacy, analytics, and art. So it's a really fun little center space where I get to advocate for equity in all of the data that Nielsen brings forward to help with content creators with their journey, to help media companies better understand the value of our community as an audience, the value of the content that we bring forward. And we get to tell all these really cool stories at Nielsen every year through different pieces of research. And I'm going to try and tell you what I think is a really exciting story about our community, about all of you as content creators and as community. I'm going to take you through that journey in just a few minutes. But before I do that, I want to share that this work we do at Nielsen is actually not done by me alone. There's a number of people at Nielsen that carry this message. There was a time when there were very few of us, but now there's a number of folks. And I'm actually honored to be joined today by one of my colleagues who leads a lot of this work at Nielsen. And we often talk in these rooms and on our circles about reaching back and lifting Latinas up and carrying them with us. I'm going to try not to get moved, but I'm super excited to have one of my favorite mentees and my favorite people who I've learned so much with here. Veronica, I know you're here somewhere. You told me you were in the back. I appreciate you and the work you do. You lead this work. I'm here because of you and your work. You guys, if you have the opportunity later to meet Veronica, please make sure you say hi to her. Let's give her a round of applause. She's incredible. So the work that we do at Nielsen gets a lot of attention, but the work that gets the most attention is the work where we tell stories about you all, right? As creators, as community, and your content. So like I said, I'm going to walk you through some of the high points of this report, the power of our community, but importantly, the power of diverse creators. Now, if you've been paying attention at all this year, or really this Hispanic Heritage Month, but certainly this whole year, you've heard a lot about the data of our community. Right? So I'm not going to spit it back out to you today, but everybody knows the basics, the 101s, right? You know the percentage of the population that we are. Everyone knows this, yes? Okay, great. So we don't have to rehash all of that. You know that what our consumer buying power is. You know what our GDP is. You know we're bigger than X, Y, Z countries. I'm not going to list that out for you. It's all available in the report. And by the way, if that comes up, let me go. Sorry about that. We're going to go back one. You can go up to that screenshot, that QR code. It'll take you to the report. You can grab the whole entire report there. But one of the pieces of data that comes out when we talk about communities and the value of our community that doesn't get enough attention because it's not that sexy, I suppose, although I think it is the demographic differences that our community has in compared to other communities. So I know demography isn't like exactly what you all came to the desert for in this sanctuary of peace. So we're not going to go deep into demography. But what's really important is that our population is significantly younger than any other population. Significantly. 58% of Latinos, Latine, Latinx, however you identify in the US, are below the age of 34. And in fact, 31% of our population in the US is below the age of 17. So we're really, 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 really young. But I'm going to tell you why I think that's really, really, really important and why it's changing the way, the opportunity there are for you and the opportunities around content. So when you look at how young our population is, one of the things that comes up right away is the majority of the content that we consume or time spent with television is spent with streaming content. You all knew that already though, right? You're spending most of your time with streaming content. There was a stat that came out a few weeks ago that Nielsen had that finally streaming has overtaken broadcasting cable for the general population. That happened for the Latino population, Latine, Latinx, again, however you identify. That happened for our community years ago. We're spending more than 43% of our time with streamed content. And so when we think about youth again, the models around content that gets not just created for us, certainly not by us, but the model around content that gets created, content that gets greenlit, the advertisers that many of you are reaching out to with your content, whether you're an influencer or representing a brand or product, when they're coming at all of this, they're basing it on these models that were built for an aging population that is non-Latino with different values. So this is it's a deeper concept we need to spend some time with, but those models of what they think works are based on a demographic model for a population that today is largely over the age of 61. And so it makes sense to me that when I see data like this, where the majority of our time spent, how much time we're spending, 33.5 billion minutes consuming streaming content each week, that there's not enough content available for us that represents us. Besides the fact that it's just not getting greenlit or made, it's that they're trying to push the content that we are serving up into models that are developed for other populations. Really quickly, gives you a little more perspective into that. So when I said 43% of our time is spent with streaming, I wanted to give you a breakdown of it. And here's why this is important. I'm going to make this make sense for you here. Look where most of that content is in streaming, or a big chunk of it is in YouTube. You see that? Why do you all think YouTube is the place? When you look at anyone's streaming distribution, any community's streaming distribution, you're going to see people getting their content on Netflix and HBO Max. Thank you for the amazing party, HBO Max, also. But that's where people are getting their content. But for the Latino community, in addition to those, a huge amount of time is spent with YouTube. YouTube is creator-driven content. That's where we're finding content made for us, about us, and by us, right? Content that we're making for ourselves. And again, when you think about the population being so much younger, it makes sense that since we're not seeing that into the old models that are built around the type of content that's being created and pushed to us, that we're seeking that content in alternative platforms or platforms outside of traditional streaming platforms like YouTube. The other thing that you all know, and I'm sure you feel this, is that we seek representative content. Well, you know that already, right? You want to see content that represents yourself, your stories. And I think it's sort of coming to a tipping point. As we are pushing and demanding, it seems, however, though, that our advocacy just isn't enough. It's not enough. We bring forward data, yet we're still seeing some of the most popular pieces of content among our communities either get canceled or being put under tremendous scrutiny to be successful immediately. I do think the industry is listening, though, and I think they are bringing forward or trying to bring forward new content. But think about the content that really works, that's successful. It's content that breaks the mold a little bit, right? It doesn't follow that traditional model that is built for an aging population that they're trying to push us into. Here are a few pieces of content. Now, I know within this there's a beloved piece of content that got canceled, I know that. But I'm sharing it with you because I want to talk for you for a quick second about success, right? When I talk about Latino-led content, we looked within our report at these 4 pieces of content where Latinos were either Latino-led or behind the camera. And what is super interesting about each of these, listen to this analysis. We went and looked at the viewers for these specific shows, and we wanted to understand, did they come to platforms just for this show? Essentially, you heard about Gordita Chronicles, so you went to HBO Max just for that. You had no viewing prior. That was your first instance of viewing. And then we went back and we looked a month or so later and we said, are those folks still on that platform consuming content? Not just Latinos, in general. Did people come for this? How attractive is Latino-led and starring content? Interestingly enough, extremely. Right? People came to platforms just for this content. So that's the story for media companies and entertainment companies. As they're looking to greenlight content, as they're making decisions about what's going to matter, they can see that the viewers that come for that content are more valuable because they stay longer. They subscribed or came to a platform just for these pieces, and they stayed longer. Interestingly, they're also really attractive to Latino audiences. One other thing I'm going to talk with you about, specifically about our golden touch. So we took a look, and thank you, Veronica, again, for this amazing piece of research. We took a look at the 530 top pieces of streamed content. So you're all streaming content. I'm not talking about Latino-led, in front of or behind the camera. I just said, let's look at the top 530 pieces of streamed content in the country. And of that content, 134 pieces are what we call highly bingeable content, right? Content that you're watching just a lot of. You're getting in there, and the score is a 3 or higher. The detail, though, is that Latino people are highly binging this content, right? Not necessarily Latino-led, in front of or behind the camera. We're talking about highly bingeable content. Of that content, there was about 134 shows that fit into that mold of highly bingeable. Latinos directly influenced that content. 42% of that content had Latino influence either in front of or behind the camera in a key role. That's important, right? So while we're only present 9% of the time on screen, 8% of the time behind the camera, when it comes to America's most watched content, we're touching 42% of that content. That tells you something about the talent that we have that's untapped. We also took a look at something that we call cultural watchability. The bottom line of this big slide with plus signs and equal signs, take a picture of it if you want to remember it, is that when you have representation in front of the camera and behind the camera in different degrees, you end up driving cultural watchability. Short story, we want to watch content where we're featured, but when you add also behind the camera representation, you get a lift in watchability of that content. Now, when we talk about behind the camera, I'm talking about in a key role. So think about that, right? A showrunner, a producer, a writer. Why would that influence someone's, the watchability of a piece of content? People don't always know, right? Who's the showrunner, who's the writer? Well, I'd argue that does because that's where nuance gets folded in. The nuance that we see, the nuance that's meaningful to us. For those of you that are Cubano, Cubana, como yo, when I watched, there's got to be a couple, when I watched In the Heights, and there's one scene where they're in Abuela's kitchen, and yes, there's a lot of Puerto Rican culture, there's a lot of culture in that movie, but they scan across the kitchen and we see ropa vieja. And they don't say that what it is, it's never mentioned, but you see it, you recognize it, right? So this is the nuance. This is one example, but you see this nuance, and that's brought to you from behind the camera, not necessarily in front of the camera. These are your representation numbers. I threw this up here because I want you just to take a look at it. Overall, as I said, our representation in streaming is just 9%. That's for Latine overall. For Latinas, that's about 4%. That's our on-screen representation in the top content in streaming. Take that in for a second. It's dramatic. But when you think about representation, there has been some progress. If we look at our initial work a few years ago, we've made some progress. Latinos are achieving more representation on screen. But what I think is really important is whether or not that representation can be dangerous. I'm going to walk you through this really quickly. What we did is we took a look at Latinas and we took a look at white women. And we looked at, for the Latina component, when Latinas are both on screen and in the audience at a high percentage. So how Latinas are seeing themselves presented in content. The stuff you see on the outside are the themes in which Latinas, seeing Latinas on screen, are most seeing themselves. Police stations. You can see that, right? And then, of course, on the other side is white women. When white women are in the audience at a high percentage and cast in content, how are they seeing themselves presented in content? This is real data, folks. This isn't my opinion. This is data that we're bringing forward. Now, the value of this is being able to understand it's not just about representation, it's about the type of representation. The beauty of the work that we're doing at Nielsen in product and in capabilities building is being able to operationalize that data so that we can serve it up. We can serve it up to media companies, to folks that are making decisions about whether or not they want to be in your content, even if your creator content, your influencer content. The quality of your content matters. And increasingly, that's going to be a selling point for brands that are looking to make sure that their creative, that their brand is placed within an environment that speaks about their social justice goals, that speaks to their personal values. That wasn't even a thing a few years ago, not significantly, right? The quality of the type of content was important, but it was really about eyeballs and reach and gross impressions. Today, they're looking to the quality of the type of environment that your content, that entertainment content is providing to ensure that their brand is in a place that reflects their personal DEI values. And so, as I close this out, I want to remind you, research tells us that media has the power to shape audiences' knowledge about important topics, right? Topics like politics, topics like other communities. And it's not just audiences shaping opinions about us, it's also us shaping opinions about ourselves based on how we're presented in content. Interestingly, as I look across this room, and I met some of you at lunch too, look how different we all are, just in this room, in this space. Think about the stories that you see on television. Think about what's presented, the content that you're consuming today, and think about how different we all are and sort of this single narrative that's being pushed externally about us. Even the positive ones. There are so few pieces of content being created. There's so much pressure on those pieces of content to be everything for every one of us. We need to have grace with the pieces of content that do come out, that are reflective of our community, continue to push for more. But remember that even within this room, there are hundreds of untapped stories, untapped creative. In this room, you are artists, creatives, musicians, I'm sure, and none of it, or very little of it, is making its way on screen. We must be given the opportunity to contribute and to participate. It certainly is good for our own perceptions of ourselves, for other perceptions of us, but hopefully, as I've outlined in this report and given you a little bit of a taste of today, it's also really, really, really good for business. Thank you. Adios.